Hi, Tony and I want to welcome you to our study into parables. We have been for the past couple of days dealing with parables spoken to Jesus' followers. So the other day we heard the parable of the two builders. That's the one that came at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, where one built on a rock and one built on the sand. And the purpose of that parable was to say, listen to what Jesus teaches in the Sermon on the Mount and then do it. Then we also looked at the parable of the Good Samaritan. That was yesterday. And again, that was to Jesus' followers. And he was basically saying to them, if you want to be like me, you cannot limit and put boundaries around the love that you give to other people. Today, we're looking at another parable that speaks to Jesus' followers. It's called the parable of the workers in the vineyard. So Tony and I are going to read a little bit back and forth here. So why don't you start us off?
Jesus told a parable like this. For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. After agreeing with the laborers for the usual daily wage, he sent them into his vineyard. When he went out about 9 o'clock, he saw others standing idle in the marketplace, and he said to them, You also go into the vineyard, and I will pay you whatever is right. So they went. When he went out again about noon, and about 3 o'clock, he did the same. And about 5 o'clock he went out and found others standing around, and he said to them, Why are you standing here idle all day?
And they said to him, because nobody's hired us.
He said to them, You also go into the vineyard. When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his manager, Call the laborers and give them their pay, beginning with the last and then going to the first. When those hired about 5 o'clock came, each of them received the usual daily wage. Now when the first came, they thought they would receive more, but each of them also received the usual daily wage.
When they received it, they grumbled against the landowner, saying, These last worked only 1 hour, and you've made them equal to us, who've borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat.
But he replied to one of them, Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for the usual daily wage? Take what belongs to you and go. I choose to give to this last the same as I give to you. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or are you envious because I am generous? So the last will be first, and the first will be last.
Every parable answers a specific question. And I've said frequently, I'll remind you again, you don't lift a parable out of its context, but rather you study it within the context. So Tony and I are going to give you a really quick overview of some passages that start with Matthew 19 and go to the end of chapter 20. And this is the context. Jesus is in a dialogue with his disciples. They're talking about such things as status and envy and boasting and jealousy. And he is giving them some really corrective information. So Tony, why don't you start us off?
Matthew 19:13 through 15. Jesus' disciples believe that he is too important to take time to welcome and bless children. But Jesus corrects their opinion.
Right. Matthew chapter 19, verses 16 through 22 is a story of a rich young ruler. Came to Jesus, wanted to know about eternal life. Jesus said, sell everything you have. That's deny yourself. And then take up your cross and then follow me by giving that to other people. Jesus addressed his worldview.
Matthew 20:27 through 30. Peter asked about the reward that Jesus' followers will receive. Jesus assures him of a great reward, but ended with the same words he gave to this parable. But many who are first will be last, and the last will be first.
And then Jesus gave the parable, Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16. And he ends that parable with the same word that Peter said. The first will be last, the last will be first. That's really key.
Matthew 20:17 through 19. Jesus will not be exalted as expected by his followers when he comes to Jerusalem. Rather, he will be betrayed and crucified in the most humiliating and painful of deaths.
In Matthew 20, verses 20 through 28, the mother of the sons of Zebedee came to Jesus and wanted him to give them a prominent place in his kingdom. And instead, Jesus said to them, whoever wishes to be first must be a slave. See how he keeps reversing things throughout this whole dialogue?
Matthew 20:29 through 34. The healing of two blind men demonstrates the proper attitude to Jesus. Jesus asked them, "What do you want me to do for you?" They said to him, "Lord, let our eyes be opened."
And this is the climax of his whole dialogue with his disciples. They needed their eyes open. So they needed to be like the blind men and come to Jesus. "Lord, what do you want to do for us?" Or what can you do? Jesus would say to them, "Ask me to have your eyes open so that you can see my attitudes and my actions." Now, let's try to apply this parable. As we look at where it fits within all Jesus is saying, there is a common theme. It addresses such things as envy, boasting, jealousy, and justice. And Jesus gives us some things. Let me just read you some statements that show how he turns the world of our normal values upside down. These will be easy to understand in our head. They'll be much harder to put into our lives. So instead of being envious of other people's good fortune, we should rejoice in how God has blessed them. We need to see how God ranks other people. Two different times. It's very important. Two different times. They serve like bookends around information. Two times he says the first will be last and the last first. We need to ask the Lord, "Lord, open our eyes to help us see what you're doing here." And then the owner. The owner is good, different from the rich young ruler, because he gives to the poor. By the way, he's also different from those workers of his who grumbled that they didn't get paid enough. Another thing Jesus gives in terms of the area of justice, justice requires positive action by seeking the good for all persons, especially the poor. You see how that fits with the parable of the Good Samaritan? Good Samaritan cared. He didn't put boundaries around his service. And then finally, we can give up. This is a huge thing. We can give up the quest to be first, knowing that God's standards are different. So if we give up the quest to be first, what are we doing? Well, we are trying to live, like Dallas Willard says, we're trying to live a Jesus kind of life. We look at what Jesus did, we look at what he said, and we say, "Lord, by the power of the Spirit, help us to do the same." Well, thanks a bunch for being a part of this parable study, and for the other ones. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. God bless you and have a great day.